entanglement from which we need to escape has its origin in the very same principle which gives rise to liberty and power. It is the same principle applied under inverted conditions. And here I would draw particular attention to the law that any sequence followed out in an inverted order must produce an inverted result, for this goes a long way to explain many of the problems of life. The physical world affords endless examples of the working of inversion. In the dynamo, the sequence commences with mechanical force which is ultimately transformed into the subtler power of electricity, but invert this order. Commence by generating electricity, and it becomes converted into mechanical force, as in the motor. In the one order, the rotation of a wheel produces electricity, and in the opposite order, electricity produces the rotation of a wheel. Or to exhibit the same principle in the simplest arithmetical form, if 10 divided by 2 equals 5, then 10 divided by 5 equals 2. Inversion is a factor of the greatest magnitude and has to be reckoned with, but I must content myself here with only indicating the general principle that the same power is capable of producing diametrically opposite effects if it be applied under opposite conditions, a truth which the so-called magicians of the Middle Ages expressed by two triangles placed inversely to one another. We are apartment to fall into the mistake of supposing that results of opposite character require powers of opposite character to produce them, and our conceptions of things in general become much simplified when we recognize that this is not the case, but that the same power will produce opposite results as it starts from opposite poles. Accordingly, the inverted application of the same principle which gives rise to liberty and power constitutes the entanglement from which we need to be delivered before power and liberty can be attained, and this principle is expressed in the law that as a man thinks, so he is. This is the basic law of the human mind. It is Descartes' cogito, ergo sum. If we trace consciousness to its seat, we find that it is purely subjective. Our external senses would cease to exist were it not for the subjective consciousness which perceives what they communicate to it. The idea conveyed to the subjective consciousness may be false, but until some truer idea is more forcibly impressed in its stead, it remains a substantial reality to the mind which gives it objective existence. I have seen a man speak to the stump of a tree which in the moonlight looked like a person standing in a garden, and repeatedly ask its name and what it wanted, and so far as the speaker's conception was concerned, the garden contained a living man who refused to answer. Thus every mind lives in a world to which its own perceptions give objective reality.